Have you ever found yourself so mired in conflict that it felt like dread to you? Maybe the topic was around a disagreement you had with your partner on politics or budgeting. Or maybe it's a terrible and ongoing fight with your sister on how to resolve issues of inheritance after your mom's passing. If you're like most people I know, there are times when conflict can lead to almost unbearable stress. In the comments below, share what happens to you when you feel extreme distress when in conflict, and what strategies work for you. Today, I'm going to offer some tips for how to better manage distress when engaging in conflict. These tips come from my new book, Conflict Resilience: Negotiating Disagreement Without Giving Up or Giving In. And you can get a copy by clicking the link right here or the link in the description. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation Clinical Program, and I have spent more than a quarter century of my life teaching and training on conflict and negotiation. So let me start by inviting you, encouraging you to reshift what I imagine you're thinking to be on the very idea of conflict. Because I think for most of us, when we think about conflict, we think of it as something negative, something to be avoided. But in our upcoming book, we actually encourage you to change your mindset on that, to become what we call conflict positive. That is, conflict is a sign of a healthy environment. That is, conflict well handled is a sign of a healthy relationship, a healthy family, and a healthy organization. So it's not something to be avoided, it's something to be embraced. It's a way to build relationships. When conflict is handled well, it surfaces differences, it surfaces tensions, it allows folks to become more authentic and more themselves. Now, I want to be clear. Even if it's healthy, I get that sometimes conflict will still feel like distress. It will still feel dreadful. But changing your mindset on it, I think, helps you deal with it and put it in a more productive perspective. So with that, let me offer you 4 practical tips, steps you can take to manage distress when you are in conflict. And stick to the end of this video when I'll share with you a very special resource that will help you to handle your distress and see conflict more positively going forward. So the first step is pause and breathe. This may sound simple, but actually just taking a short 10 seconds to pause and to breathe opens up some space for self-reflection. You know, it's really interesting. Lots of times when I see very skillful negotiators or even very skillful politicians deal with a very, very hard question, I see them pause. You could almost see their wheels thinking, and then they speak, as opposed to immediately responding. So why does this matter? There's a lot of brain research that talks about an emotional refractory period. In the moment when we are feeling triggered or angry, when our amygdala, which is the part of our brain that controls emotions, is overriding the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that actually helps us make smart, thoughtful decisions. And so just pausing for a minute allows us to redirect. It's a brain hack. It allows us to redirect from the amygdala back to the frontal lobe. In addition, research done by Jared Curhan at MIT has shown that when there is silence, even for a short amount of time, it actually increases one's capacity to be creative and to move from problem solving. Pause and breathe is so important. Second, consider what are the reasons why you might want to engage in this conflict and what are the reasons why you don't. In fact, even write them out. So imagine a conversation, let's say, with your grandmother about differences you might have with her on affirmative action. Taking the time to say, well, why do I want to have this conversation? Maybe it's because it's important to better understand your grandma's perspective. Maybe it's because there's some value to you to being assertive and expressing to her things that matter to you. Maybe it's just you want her to know how strongly you feel about it. Maybe it's because you realize, like, if I don't speak up, nothing changes. Then take the time to say, well, what are the reasons why I don't want to do this? What are the reasons why I don't want to talk to my grandma? Maybe it's because you want to be respectful of her. Maybe it's because you feel like it's hopeless. Maybe it's because you feel like she might say something hurtful. Maybe you might learn something about her that you don't like. Maybe you're just tired of always being the one in your family to raise points like this. Taking the time to write the reasons for raising something and the reasons why you don't want to actually will help reduce the likelihood of the dread or fear. Because you see, okay, like, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why not to do this, but there's a lot of reasons why you should do it. And it helps you get past that kind of volleying back and forth and say that you can own and embrace both of these lists in the conversation with confidence and without fear. Third, make a list of the interests you have for yourself and for them, and consider the range of possible outcomes that can come out of the conversation. So this last piece is really important. In the coaching work that I've done, in the consulting work that I've done, often what I see is people whose dread comes from catastrophizing. So they haven't actually thought very hard about the range of possible outcomes. They've over-focused on the worst possible one. And then they let that run in their head, and they get anxious, and they get dread, and they get stuck. And the fourth and last tip, before I give you the great resource I promised, is preparing with others. So preparing with others, from my perspective here, actually means doing a run-through of the conversation, maybe several times. The purpose here is not to have a script. Scripts do not work in conversations where dread and fear are possible, but running through several times will give you a sense of the terrain and possible outcomes. Also, when you run through several times, you'll get some feedback from the person you're practicing with, and probably the biggest thing you'll realize is that the reality of doing this is much less fearsome than the fears and worries of thinking about it. If you make it through the practice, you'll make it through the real thing. So, 4 strategies for reducing distress in conflict. First, pause and breathe. Second, write out, why do you want to engage this conflict? Why would you prefer to avoid it? Third, prepare by considering your interests, their interests, and then coming up with a range of possible outcomes. Avoid landing on the outcome that you think is most catastrophic. And fourth, preparing out loud with others will help you realize that the fear of the conversation is usually much higher than the reality. So you've made it this far in the video, and now is the gift that will help you to become even more effective in conflict. It's a link to my new book called Conflict Resilience: Negotiating Disagreement Without Giving Up or Giving In, and you can pre-order it now. In addition, before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ring the bell. Also, be sure to watch this next video on how to be more comfortable with conflict. I'm Bob Bordone. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Okay, pre-order now and keep watching. Click, click, click.